Hello and welcome to Lore Watch, a roundtable freeform discussion about lore and our favorite media. I'm your host, Joe Prez, one of several lore-focused folks from Blizzard Watch, and I've got my stupendous co-host with me today, Matt Rossi. How you doing today, Matt?
I am he is.
Indeed, you are. Normally, we'd be answering your questions this week, but we don't really have a whole lot of them. If you have any questions, I want you to go ahead and send those in, whether it's about WoW or Diablo, or whatever you want, as long as it's lore-related.
Or now, or Weablo. Weablo's my favorite game. I especially like Weablo of World.
You can go ahead and send those questions to podcast@blizzardwatch.com. If you want to hit us up on Discord, you can go ahead and send those in to our Q and Podcast Questions channel, or if you are a Patreon subscriber, you can hit us up on our Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel, where we do tend to look first for those questions, specify which of our many shows it is for, and we'll be more than happy to make sure that they wind up in the right place, and we'll get to them eventually. This week, though, we are going to be working on a little bit of a theme episode. Maybe some mild spoilers for the current patch that is live in WoW, but this spawned from a work conversation with our tentacle-loving friend Mitch, who embraces all things voidy. So here's what Mitch posed, and then we'll give some context and then give our thoughts on it and kind of break down from there. A thought occurs. From a gameplay viewpoint, of course, World of Warcraft needs villains and old gods and wars, etc. But from a logical lore perspective, why wouldn't the Titans prefer Alderoth, the Titan utopia, as the timeline that must be preserved? Why is it a rift that must be closed? Why is our timeline, where the Legion invades, the Scourge happens, Sargeras stabs Azeroth, and Nozdormu ultimately becomes Murazond, why is this preferable to the utopia? From here, I think we could talk about other things, but I think the context here is right now, it's all about the Bronze Dragonflight on live. And that Bronze Dragonflight is dealing with bringing in reining in the timeways, making sure they're clear and back to where they need to be, and then sort of dealing with the whole infinite Dragonflight and what they're doing, not just in the past, like where they have literally tried to go back into the past where Galakron has just fallen, and making sure that Murazond happens then, which isn't supposed to happen, completely throwing things into disarray, or whether it's Morchi, the evil version of Chromie, trying to force that to happen, or have mirror images of herself or different timelines of themselves, sort of there trying to help push the infinite Dragonflight around, or whatever you have there. It's all about that. And occasionally, rifts will open where they go to alternate timelines, one of them being Azmurloth, where you are dealing with the accidental timeway thing that we created, where we accidentally sent a Murloc through a time rift and created a world in which all life on Azeroth was Murloc-based, which sometimes doesn't sound as bad. There could be the one where you have the Titans prevailing, where it's literally a perfect utopia of order. And then I forgot what the other ones were. Do you remember what the other ones were? So I think there's 7 of them. There's the Asmorn timeline, which is the alternate timeline in which the Scourge wins the war and takes over the world. There's the Azmurloth timeline, which we already talked about. There's the Azeroth, Azeroth timeline, where King Mechagon manages to activate the Doomsday device and eradicate all organic life from Azeroth. There is Azrath items, in which the Burning Legion has won the second war and the world is overrun by demons. There's the Azkuroth, which is the timeline in which the Black Empire was never opposed by the Titans and continues to rule in the planet, which, lots of lovely Nazathian things happen there, a lot of tentacles and squelching noises. I think Mitch is a real big fan of this one. There's Warlands, which is where the Alliance and Horde never had a reason to band together against threats on the planet, so the faction war just continued to escalate and never stopped. And then I think that's it. No, Alderoth, which is the one we were talking about, which is Titans instill order with an iron fist and quash any threats of corruption, such as the old gods. So lots of various different timelines that could have happened, yet not ours. And so the idea is Alderoth seems like the one that the Titans would have really wanted to go for, right? We know that they're beings of order. They want to reorder the planet. They want to reorder the cosmos. They're sort of programmed to do that. So why isn't Alderoth the default? Why isn't that what we grew in or evolved from? Like, it would make sense, or at least logically, when you start breaking it down, that why Alderoth would maybe be the default. It would be the perfectly ordered Azeroth in which there is no variance. It grew exactly as the Titans wanted, with the old gods going away, every threat being squashed, the Burning Legion never happening, or being defeated in such a manner that it never ever came to Azeroth in and of itself. But why isn't that the default timeline? Why isn't that the preferred timeline? A completely untouched, unbothered Azeroth.
Because it isn't the proper timeline. It's invading, just like all the others are. The 7 timelines that you're talking about, they're invading, they're infecting, they're corrupting our timeline. They're not supposed to exist. Even the Titan Utopia isn't supposed to exist.
But I guess that's the question. Why isn't the Titan Utopia supposed to exist?
Because the Titan Utopia does not. It only has order. All of these timelines are, for lack of a better word, where one cosmic force achieves ascendancy over the others. A timeline where one cosmic force achieves ascendancy over the others is a timeline that is doomed. That's what I've been thinking about ever since Shadowlands, ever since the Jailer.
Mm-hmm.
When he's like, you have no idea what's coming. And we keep seeing I don't want to say evidence of, but hints of the idea that the cosmic orrery it's corrupted by perspective. One possibility, one thing I always came up was we had the original cosmology chart, and then we had the one in the Grimoire of Shadowlands, which it was just inverted. It was just look at it from this angle. But I started to think about that from the perspective of it's a 2-dimensional drawing of extra-dimensional planes.
Yeah, we talked about that before, because the 2-dimensional drawing isn't even just of a 3-dimensional space, because reality is made up of more than that. It's made up of more than just a stock 3 dimensions. You have time and space. You have the weird way that planes can intersect each other and overlap.
Yeah. And in this setting, you have all these extra-dimensional planes that are like the homes of, for lack of a better word, the various fundamental cosmic forces. Yeah. And it is, I was saying Azrael, sorry. Alderoth might look like the Titan Utopia. It may be even called the Titan Utopia, but the Titan Utopia is only a utopia for the Titan. And also, when we say the Titans, we don't even know that the actual Titans are involved in it. Mm-hmm. It could just be the Titan Keepers. The Keepers are not the Titans. They are creations of the Titans that were put here to keep Azeroth on keel so that the essence inside of it could develop. If they achieve perfect symmetrical order, they could very well be strangling the baby in its crib.
Yeah, so it's interesting you bring that up, because I think there's a couple things, and I'm on the same wavelength with that, right? Because one of the things we've also seen that's been a theme of I'd say the last maybe 3-4 expansions even, is this idea of evolution, right? This idea of growth and sort of becoming more than what you are. And I think Shadowlands really put a lot of that in perspective in terms of for Azeroth, right? We used to think that the old statement of, eating Lashan's heart and then having it say, rebuild the final Titan, was putting Azeroth back together again and making Azeroth just another one of the Titans. But you posited a long time ago that what does that even mean? What does that mean to rebuild the final Titan? What if it was always the intention of Azeroth to be something more than what it was? And this is well before Shadowlands. Then we get to Shadowlands, and we get to the Sepulchre of the first ones. We wind up in this sort of... It's not quite a tomb, but it's like a repository of information, a repository of the cosmos that touches Azeroth in a way, and gives us sort of like this context where there might have been a grander plan. There might have been something else that the first ones were looking to do, and it might have been to fight that threat that the jailer talks about, like you pointed out, that, you know, maybe they knew about from the very beginning or could sense and knew that it was coming, like the Great Devourer, the great time between, or space between planes, or whatever it is, which we now know, thanks to confirmation in the Shadowlands, are things that do exist. There are things that consume anima that can come from different realities or aren't exactly part of our universe that can enter into our universe, almost Langolier style, and start eating the place up. Langolier style being a reference to a Stephen King novel in which the history is, or past is eaten. Like, there is no time travel, because there's no such thing as going back in time. Regardless, though, it's a fascinating idea. And when Mitch asked this question, I brought up something similar. But there's also another thing. Uldaroth isn't a utopia. And I think that's one of the key things that a lot of people that ask this particular type of question miss. Uldaroth, I think, is what happens when the Titans programming doesn't work. When they go haywire, when the code is disrupted or the virus infects. Because think about it, the game hints that the Titans are, or at least strongly suggests, that the Titans are created with a specific job in mind, very likely by the first ones, very similar to the Pantheon of Death, right? They all seem to have a mantle of power. They all seem to have a very specific thing that they want to do when it comes to within that realm of reality. And we know that they tend to order planets and then move on. They don't stick around. They don't like watch and nurture the planet to make sure that it keeps going in the route that it's going to. Even with Azeroth, even when they showed up, even when they plucked the old god from it, learned that they wounded the planet, and put all the facilities in place, they didn't stay around. They didn't, incubate the egg themselves. They trusted watchers or things that they created to handle that for them while they moved on throughout the rest of the universe. It wasn't until Sargeras came back and was threatening the place that they show back up. Right? Am I wrong in that?
Well, I think it's more that Sargeras basically, when they ran into Sargeras, when they finally understood what was happening to him and they confronted him, they attempted to reason with him by mentioning Azeroth, by saying, look, we actually found one of those worlds that was corrupted by those things you're so worried about, and we fixed it. And he did not take that, because the way he took it is basically that they were fools for even attempting to do so, and that, but I always have thought that it was more a reaction of, if you could have saved it, if you could have fixed that world instead of just destroying it, that means he murdered a baby. He murdered a baby Titan that could have been saved had he managed to figure out a way to do it. And that was not something he was willing to listen to.
No, that's a very damning thing to think about, too.
Yeah. That makes him a failure. A rebel is not a failure. A rebel has said, this entire thing is messed up. We need a better way. If you could actually have succeeded in the older way, if you could have just fixed the world, then all the steps he'd taken, rebelling against the Titans, pursuit of order, going to break his own prison to let the Legion out, all the worlds he'd scoured since, all of it was for nothing. And that is not a message that Sargeras, in his, at this point, demented, overwhelming pride and hubris, was willing to listen to. He was not going to be here to hear it. And everything he's done since, from striking down the Pantheon to recapturing them to trying to break them in his torture chamber, has been about getting them to agree with him, getting them to see things his way. And it's interesting to think about the way they act about this mission that they have. Kind of does beg the question, did they get this mission from anybody? Like, did they literally, do they know about the first ones? We know that because Odin knows about the first one.
Yeah, which means if Odin knows about it, the Titans have to know about them, at least in some capacity.
Yeah. If Odin knows, then the Titans absolutely know, because all of Odin's original knowledge comes from the Titans. If the Titans know about the first ones, were they literally just like the Eternal ones from Shadowlands? Were they made to purpose, as you've pointed out? You've been saying this the whole time. Were they deliberately made to purpose, and do they know that? Was Sargeras literally rebelling against the first ones? Was he doing what the jailer basically did and said, no, your whole idea is dumb. This isn't going to work. We have to do something else. And if so, why? Was it just the void entities? Or if he knew that this cosmos was supposed to go towards integrating all these different forces together, one of those forces is void.
Mm-hmm.
And he hates the void. The
And
void drives him mad. The void makes him so insanely angry that he joined up with Fel, which is not exactly much better.
For context, if anybody doesn't know, Sargeras, when he originally came across a void-infested planet, split it in twain. Right, like he was the dread bearer of this burden, right? And it was a nascent world soul or a nascent soul that he had taken out because he didn't see another way to get around it. Void being completely anathema to what the Titans are, and in context, you know, in here, Titans are creatures of order. We know that. We know that they crave it, they want it, whether they're programmed for it or whatever. It is core to their being. Now, when you have something that is the complete opposite of that, in this case, the void is all possibilities. The void is chaos in so much of there is no one clear path. Everything is valid. Everything is true.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note that on some versions of the cosmology chart, void and light are placed as opposites. But you could just as easily move the cosmology chart around and have order opposed to void.
Because, and also to keep in mind that shadow is very different than void.
Yes. Shadow is not void. Void is, although they two do interact.
They're neighbors.
But that's also another interesting thing, because we talk about Fel briefly. Fel is also chaotic, but it's chaotic in a completely different way. It's not the void is kind of like, you know, the thousand truths idea, the idea that anything is possible. It's the unknown, unformed potential. It's what could be. Well, this could be, or that could be, or this could be, but none of them are yet, so we can't. Whereas Fel is nothing.
Well, kind of.
It's all been destroyed. No, let me get to it. Fel is not the potential thing. It's not we haven't made a decision yet. Fel is we've made a disastrous decision. And that disastrous decision is mutually assured destruction between two other cosmic forces.
Yes.
And think about what that means about Fel, and what that means about the cosmos, and what that means about what we're talking about. Why is Uldaroth not the preferred destination? Why isn't this what they want? Why are we stopping it? Because while Fel is about destruction, it's also about mutation.
Evolution.
Yeah, you don't have life without death. You don't have light without the void. You don't have order without chaos. These things they are oppositional, but they are also a continuum.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't have a universe that just lets one of them be ascendant over all the others and call it good. Even if that force is personified by Titan followers and Titan worshippers, it doesn't mean that that's the proper outcome.
Yeah, so like we talked about this before, and I brought up that even when Anne was still here, Azeroth is unique, right? Among all planets in the cosmos, among all things in existence, Azeroth is unique. All elements and forces gather here, even void, even Fel. All life that is born of the soil or the make of Azeroth can wield all of them, including void, including shadow,
including Fel.
Yep, we have. That's a big part of it as well. And I want to put it like real quick. When we go to Shadowlands and talk about the sepulchre of the first ones, we know that particular realm has something that touches Azeroth. There is a piece of it that is programmed to touch Azeroth. And we are led to believe that there are other facilities in other realms of existence that were created or set up to do exactly the same thing. We've even
heard of one.
Which one was that?
Zereth Ordis.
Zereth Ordis.
Which is apparently the Order one. And that might be, we've never actually figured out how the Titans get here. Why are the Titans in our world instead of in some other plane of existence?
And they don't seem to talk about it either.
No, they very rarely do we hear anything. There's like been supposition that there's like little bits of cosmic force, like arcane energy gets wrapped in a planet, but we don't. Why is arcane energy like a pearl? Like, ooh, arcane energy, we better seal that up. So the cosmos puts it in a planet. I mean, we have no idea. We have no frame of reference for this. It's never been explained. But if the Titans, which are arcane beings, because the plane of order is often also called the plane of the arcane power. That's the energy you see coming out of Azeroth when it's wounded and the Well of Eternity forms, is arcane power. Arcane power also forces things to evolve. Because we know if you expose, say, Murlocs to it, you get Jinyu. If you expose dark trolls to it, you get night elves. So why does it do that? What does that have to do with the fact that they were calling the Mogul were calling the power they were using to mutate life anima?
Yeah, I was going to say, we also don't know that other powers can't do that or don't do that.
That's where I'm going. What if that's why Fel and Arcane, which are supposedly so opposed, can both do this?
Mm-hmm.
Except that because anima can do this, and they're all forms of anima. All of it is. Because everything's made of anima, right?
Yeah, that's one of the lessons that Shadowlands taught us, is that everything in existence is or is comprised of anima.
And anything that doesn't made of anima and that destroys anima is from somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And now think about this. That goes for void entities too. That goes for, even the craziest, most old gaudy things. There has to be a part of that in the cosmos. You need to have you have to have the possibilities both of the Fel kind and of the void kind. You have to have the possibilities of the unknown and the possibilities of the unwanted.
You made this analogy a while ago, and I still remember it. And I have it written down in my notebook of, yes, I have a notebook next to my computer that whenever we do these episodes and we get into wild tangents, I make notes for later reference because we get on some wild tangents, folks. You made a reference to basically the void being almost like an infinite sea, and it's easy to get lost on it. Mm-hmm. And the light is that lighthouse at the end that lets you sort of find your path, right? It's very similar to what old navigation was. It's very similar to, if you want to go the 40K route, what the Astro Telepathica does in the sea of a chaotic storm of energies, guiding humanity or guiding ships from one point to another. Light lets you navigate the chaos, and without the chaos, light doesn't have a purpose. Without the light, chaos doesn't really do anything either. It just kind of roils upon itself.
Another way to look at it is like with this. There's the old T.S. Eliot quote from the poem. It's like between the act and the execution falls the shadow. The shadow, the void. They're not quite the same thing, but the void is basically all this stuff that we don't know what it is. Light shines on it, and now we know this thing is one of the things that we didn't know, but now we know it. If you don't go that way, all the stuff that you deliberately avoid is Fel. But that stuff isn't deliberately avoided by everybody, because there has to be the ability to make different choices. If you don't have the ability to make different choices, then everything is just a clockwork ticking its way down to the end. The only way for there to be a possibility of there being more is for there to be less. You have to be able to screw up in order to achieve more than you think you can do. If everything is just programmed, if everybody is just a servant to order being imposed on them, then everybody is just a slave. And slavery is the robbing of potential. It's the taking a being and saying, you don't get to choose who you are, you don't get to choose what you do, you can just do. And if you don't do, then we will purge you and find something else. It treats beings like cogs. But that's the whole. Oddly enough, it was the Infinite Dragonflight who once said, we will shatter this clockwork universe. But I think that's because they understand that it isn't clockwork. It can't be clockwork. If the cosmos becomes clockwork, then there's no point. The only reason we have clocks is to tell us what time it is, And they just do that. That's all they do. They don't make time. They don't speed time up or slow time down. They don't use time. They just tell you what it is. That's fine for a clock. That can't be a universe. a universe where everything is preordained, where everything is set up. I mean, that's just as bad from the Titans' perspective when they're not, losing it like Sargeras did. It's just as bad to have a universe where nothing can change or grow. I mean, that's why they have the, Sholazar. That's why they had Ungoro. They didn't just want to leave Azeroth and to go about its business. They wanted to perfect it. Perfecting it does not necessarily mean making it just like them. And that's, I think, the thing we keep missing. When the Titans are fully in control of the show, when it's not the Mogu making decisions, when it's not other Titan Forged making decisions, when it's not Odin, when the Titans themselves are running the show, even just through distant updates, the purpose isn't to make Azeroth be just a patterned, organized thing. Because look at it was always said that the Emerald Dream was the blueprint, the backup, right?
Mm-hmm. Or at least we've posited that, yeah.
If the Emerald Dream was considered to be the backup, why was it wilder and more untamed? Why would we go back to less Titan if things went wrong?
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that too, because this leads into another line of thinking that I've been thinking about for a while, and this is something that I think we talked about maybe a year or 2 years ago. It's been a while. Is this idea of what does the final Titan mean, or what does that even mean?
Oh my God. I was just going to say that, and I was like, I got to wait and let him talk.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I think we're on the same page here.
Yeah. I was thinking about that just in terms of this much, and then I'll let you say what you were going to say. But we keep looking at the final Titan and not really focusing on what final means.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, final could mean the last Titan, but it could also mean the Titan who ends Titans.
Yep.
And not necessarily in a destroys them way. There won't be Titans after this because there won't be this separation of these different forces. This being will bring about a new order.
And I think to that effect, and this is where I was going with it, on that same page, we're already there. We talked about this before. Mm-hmm. What happens when we fight Algalon?
We beat him even though that's not possible.
What does he say about us?
He goes, how did you manage to defeat, against cosmically calculated odds? Perhaps it is your imperfection, that which gives you free will.
Now think about that. Think about everything that we've gone through, everything we've done. We can very clearly travel the dimensions. We are able to go to the Shadowlands. Shadowlands showed us that much. We are essentially the Maw Walker. We are these fantastic entities of beings of almost Nephilim proportions. We are the distillation of all of these forces into one physical form. We might be what the end result was intended. Everybody keeps arguing that Azeroth is going to wake up and the shell's going to crack and there's going to be another Titan born and the Titan will ride off into the sunset and fight the Void Titans, and that's why the old gods are here to try to corrupt it and turn it into a Void Titan and all this stuff.
But when the old gods corrupt things, what do they corrupt?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they corrupt us. They started with Titans and tried to turn those Titans into beings of flesh so they could manipulate them more effectively. And then when they did that, suddenly they created beings that absolutely could and often do follow them. But they also created beings that can go into their sanctum after they've broken their chains and kill them.
Yeah, because we can do what the Titans couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
The Titans
they might not die because they're weird, but still.
But we don't know that.
Stop them. Yeah.
But again, we don't know that. We don't know that Cthulhu is still alive. We don't know.
No, we have no idea what's going on with them. They might be alive. They might be dead. But even if they are alive, we stopped them.
And we stopped them cold.
Yeah.
But I mean, I keep coming back to that. And it's impossible after spending so much time playing Diablo 4 and going through that story and talking about it to not see the parallels there. Mm-hmm. We are essentially the Nephilim. What if that is the entire purpose of Azeroth? It's not for Azeroth itself to get up, but what if that's its parallel with Argus? Argus was used as a power for an engine, right? Mm-hmm. And what did that engine do?
That engine basically acted as a resurrection machine
that continued to take in all of these souls as a resurrection point, churn them through, push them back into our reality and back out into the universe. And we knew that the power of its soul, its anima, or whatever you want to call it, could do that. We also know that the power it contained was enough to break the Arbiter when it was forced through into the Shadowlands, something that was never supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
What if that's kind of what Azeroth was always meant to be in the first place? Not in painful torture like Argus was. Because again, how does Sargeras know to do that? How did he know to do that with a Titan soul?
Yeah, how did he know to do it to the Pantheon?
Because he did. He knew how to convert the Pantheon. He knew how to take their souls. He knew how to extract them. He knew how to do a whole bunch of stuff that seems very, very odd. And likely it's due to the Nathrazim, and there's probably something there. And that's a topic for another story. But I don't think Azeroth was ever meant to wake up. Not fully.
I actually have a completely different idea, but it's based on basically the same idea.
Okay, go for it.
Azeroth has woken up.
This is as awake as it gets. Yep, that's why I was kind of going.
I don't mean this is awake as it gets. I mean, you are a thought that Azeroth is having.
Yes.
As is every other being on Azeroth. This is how it manifests itself. It manifests as a multitude.
Yeah, we were getting to the same point. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it is a multiplicative being. It is not. They are not just this gold, and for that matter, that might actually be the case for all Titans.
Or what the original case might have been.
Yeah, we've only seen Titans through either their creations or the result of what happens when their physical form got destroyed.
But what was missing from those other Titans that Azeroth had?
I mean, we could come up with a few, but go ahead and tell me yours, because I'm see if I'm even close.
Not only does it have the facilities from all of the realities that touch it, it also is one of the few that has successfully had void infused into it that has not been fully consumed.
No, it has not.
Every other planet that's had that happen to them was destroyed, or in the form of Koresh has been fully consumed. Argus was blown partially apart, and part of it, the part that was void consumed, is completely detached from it.
I mean, there's also that world that we know one of Elun's chosen managed to destroy the old god and stop it. Mm-hmm. But that's Elun again, so that might actually tie into it. But one of the things I was thinking as you were talking about that, though, which I think is related to it, it's not that we've had the void infused into the world and managed to survive it. It's that we can actually make the void do what we want it to do, and not what it wants to do, if it even knows what it wants to do. Because we have the capacity to look at all the 1,000 truths it throws at us and say, I want this one, which is not something that the void knows what to do about.
We can wield the lighthouse.
It tries to break people so that they just start doing whatever they're told by the whispers. But if you can listen to the whispers and not be broken, you can control it. And that's something we see with Illyria and the Void Elves. And it's something we've seen with other characters. We've seen it with even Zeliek, who was yeah, I'm a dead corpse. I'm completely suffused with the power of death, but I can use the light, and I can tell the light what to do. And the light will do it because I believe that I can do this. I have faith that I can do it. And I was thinking about this ever since in Shadowlands, we got the whole bit with, Argus's sister, Kalia Menethil, where we hear the whole thing where they go to the Shadowlands and they're like, well, I was raised this way. And the person from the Shadowlands, whose name I'm forgetting, says, necromancy isn't a type of it is not a type of power. Any force that is sufficiently powerful can perform necromancy. You can perform necromancy with the light. You can perform necromancy with the void. You can perform necromancy with Fel. And we already knew that
Shaman
about the
can
void
do that.
and Fel.
Shaman can do it as well.
Yeah. Shaman can raise the dead, which is necromancy.
Yeah.
And all these different powers can do it. Pretty much the druids using nature magic can absolutely raise the dead. I don't remember if monks have a res, but I'm pretty sure they do.
They do.
Yeah, and that means monks can do it with chi. Chi is pretty close to being just pure anima.
Yep.
It might even be pure anima.
Warlocks can raise the dead. Paladins can raise the dead. Priests can raise the dead. Shaman can raise the dead. Druids can raise the dead. The only ones that can't, Death Knights can raise the dead. Demon Hunters can't. Fighters can't.
Warriors.
Warriors. Sorry. Again, too much Diablo, folks.
I mean, for that matter, mages can't yet.
Evokers can.
Yeah.
Mages are a hop, skip, and a jump away from that because they are now starting to mess around with the power of time.
Yeah, they could reverse and speed up time. So,
which we know that the Bronze Dragonflight has done, has rolled back time in order to save people. We've watched them do. We actively participate with that in a dungeon when we're fighting Murazond, right?
Yep.
So literally every classification of power currently on Azeroth has the ability to commit necromancy.
Yeah, death magic, the power of death that you see in the Shadowlands isn't the same thing as necromancy. Necromancy is just using a kind of power to do that. And that means, if you think about it, we're the first people to embody that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, sure, like we see the Titans doing stuff with their power, and we see the old gods and all that, but we never see so many different kinds of power used by one group. Like, you don't hear about Titans, although you do kind of, in that Sargeras became a Fel Titan, and we know you could be a Void Titan, but even then, they don't embody Void and Fel, or Light and Fel.
Well, think about it. When we last saw Sargeras, he didn't exactly look like he was exactly Fel corrupted.
No, he just looked like he was cracking open, a lot like Deathwing.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be more along the lines of he just simply had too much power in him.
Which we know is a theme. Like we literally in Abyss, when we're in the raid Abyss and we're fighting against Khazara and we're looking at the creation of Shadowflame, that's what that is, right? Like Shadowflame is the Shadowflame. Everything in Abyss is all about that, if nothing else. It's about combining those forces of power in making something new from it, and that power being it can be destructive, but it can also be, I don't want to say creative, but it
mutates things.
It mutates things. It absolutely does, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you.
So I mean, but I think that's fascinating. But that's why I keep hounding on this, and I keep coming back to this point that the reason that this is the preferred timeline is because of us. We are supposed to exist. We are supposed to be the weapons, the idealization, the defense mechanism of the cosmos in a way. Think of all the things that we are capable of. And again, going back to Algalon, we whoop them good. We take out the Constellars. We fought 3 of them at this point, at least, right?
Yep.
We fought 3. We've not lost. They're supposed to be on par with the Titans, or at least maybe a step below them. We've whooped them good. We've beaten the manifestation of Sargeras. We've beaten his lieutenants infused with his power and Fel. We've taken out the Nathurzim. We've gone through and defeated the jailer, who is on par with a Titan, after it got its groove back, so to speak. We did a whole lot of stuff that we shouldn't theoretically be able to do, and I think that's the point. That's
even brought up when you kill Argus. The one of the points that's made in the quest is that this shouldn't be possible. You shouldn't be able to kill Argus. I think that's one of the reasons that when Argus's essence went to the Shadowlands, it broke the Arbiter, because he's not. At no time is death supposed to touch him. But that's from the old, outmoded idea that these forces are separate and inviolate from each other. That you can't be Fel and Light and Void, and you can't be all this at once. But I think Illidan, of all people, was the first to really start understanding that, yeah, you could.
I think he might be, because of the entities on Azeroth that have the capacity to understand it, he's one of them. I think the other one is Queen Azshara.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, Azshara, absolutely.
I think she understands the truth of it.
I think the reason I mentioned Illidan is because, in a way, you see him doing it.
Yeah, he's doing exactly that.
He approaches the Fel as if it were just arcane magic.
And it works.
Even though he knows it's different, he knows it isn't the same force, but he uses it the same way.
Look at Demon Hunters, right? That's what Demon Hunters are. The Demon Hunters are essentially taking that Fel, taking the power of demons and ingesting it into themselves, right? And using that as a furnace.
And using it very much against the things that consider themselves to be the masters of Fel. In much the same way that what Illyria and later the Void Elves is doing is basically saying to the Void, no more of you telling us what to do.
Which we know other entities can do as well, because look at Locust Walker.
Yeah. And Locust Walker is, bloody heck.
Ethereal.
They are. Thank you, and ethereal. But when we say Azeroth, we talk about the planet, but it might be more fair to say that the
Universe.
universe of
Yeah.
Azeroth, the cosmos that it is in, all these Zareths that might exist, that almost certainly do exist. We know of two. It's unlikely there aren't others. What would the Fel Zareth be doing? Where is it? What is it like? That's, I think, Uldoros, not Uldoros, Uldaroth. The reason it's not a desired cosmos from the perspective of the Titans is that it doesn't lead to new discoveries. It doesn't lead to new understanding. It doesn't lead to anything.
It stifles evolution, right? It's a full-on evolutionary stop. And I think when we were talking about it with Mitch, that's sort of where we ended up, right? So like our timeline is an amalgamation of all of the decisions that we've made to this point. Every offshoot timeline are ripples of decisions that could have been. And so Uldaroth is sort of that ripple of decision of what if the Titans never left? What if they stayed around and imposed their will while lording over the planet for eons? And but again, I go back to that whole, they're not programmed for that. That's not what we are led to believe was their intention.
For that matter, I mean, if you look at the way that the Titans interacted with each other about Azeroth, it's not something they thought was a good idea. Like, to the point where the one time that a Titan bodily interfaced with Azeroth, he heard it.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew that it was delicate work. That's why they made their various servitors and sent them in instead of coming in themselves. And when Aman'Thul, who is the wisest of the Pantheon, decided, I'm just going to rip it out, it ended up being far worse than if he'd left it there. And that, I think the issue here, I think the reason Uldaroth exists is because in a timeline where, for whatever reason, Aman'Thul didn't do that, they didn't learn that lesson. They didn't learn that their direct interaction with Azeroth was not good for Azeroth. And as a result of that, they just meddled their heads off. Because why wouldn't they? They don't have to, think about when you're playing Sims.
Mm-hmm.
You don't actually have to go in and physically manipulate your Sims. It's a video game. The game has programs and you just tell it what to do. That's what they were doing with the Titanforge. The Titanforge was basically tiny nanites to the Titans that they could put in there and just tell the nanites do whatever. And if they didn't realize, we could mess things up, we could hurt this world, then they would just keep doing it. Why wouldn't they? If they never learned that lesson, then they would just keep doing it. And I think that's why the dragon aspects exist. The reason, because remember, Tyr is the one who recruited them, but they get their power from the Titans.
Yeah, and Tyr empowered them. Yeah, I was going to say, and Tyr is one of the ones that we're learning about right now that maybe evolved past his programming. He understood the enormity of what they were doing.
Yeah, and he did that by making mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Galakrond.
The whole bit with Galakrond was just a gigantic beep. I mean, I can't say it in words that are not vulgar. Even
outside of like the infestation from it was Cthulhu. No, it was
Yogg.
It was Yogg-Saron. Even with the infestation from Yogg-Saron, notwithstanding, Galakrond potentially would have been an awful idea because we don't know that the necromancy part of it was just because of Yogg. We don't know what the true first experiment was, but we do know that this is not what Tyr intended, and it was a huge mistake, and he learned from it. And what did he learn from it? He learned, I'm going to be more careful, and I'm not going to do exactly that. So I'm going to change things up. I'm going to split it up so it's not all my eggs in one basket, because maybe that's too much for one entity to be able to handle.
And he also chose mortals.
And he chose mortals.
Yeah, the dragons at the time were mortal beings. He chose them because they were tied to Azeroth. Mm-hmm. And he even said that. You're tied to this world. You can sense things faster than we can. We're not tied to the world the way you are. And that, Uldaroth is the creation of beings who are not tied to the world. That is what it looks like when beings who don't concern themselves with ideas like being tied to the world decide they're in charge.
Yeah, like the best way I can put it is like if you've ever seen Tron. Tron is really the best example of it, right? It's what happens when the programming is just left to run. and look at Tron Legacy, like it's making its own decisions. It's left to its own devices. This is a world that doesn't have context, which is why when the user comes in, when you have somebody into that world that has perspective, that has sort of something outside of the basic programming, they're hailed as such a hero. They're hailed as such a disruptive force, right? They understand things that the program can't. And that's what Titans are. I keep referring to them as programmed beings, but I think it's accurate. Like I just keep looking at them, and they are programmed for very specific things.
Have you ever read The Structure of Scientific Revolutions?
No, I have not.
Okay, I'm going to give you just a real bare bones idea about it. But the basic concept is, one example is oxygen. We didn't know oxygen existed for a very long time. When things burned, people would like look at the burning, like, okay, you add fire to wood and you get dust and ash. Why? Why is it, why does fire do this? Why do these things turn into this? And one idea was that something called phlogiston was responsible. Phlogiston was like a spirit essence that was inside things that burned. And when you burn them, the phlogiston is released. And for eons, like literally thousands of years, people were trying to collect phlogiston and prove it. And there was a French chemist named Cuvier who kept doing the experiments, and he kept saying, this doesn't make sense. The phlogiston, like when you burn this, if there's phlogiston in it that's being released, the weight should change dramatically. And it isn't changing dramatically. The weight of, if you burn a log that weighs 10 pounds, the ash and soot and pieces will still weigh about 10 pounds, give or take. I mean, there's a little change, but it does not represent phlogiston. Where is the phlogiston? I can't find it. But he was executed during the French Revolution, and though he never got to get his idea all the way there, it fell to an English chemist who took Cuvier's work, and this has nothing to do with him being superior because he's English or any of that. The English absolutely said that, but that's not the case. He himself admitted, no, it was Cuvier. I wasn't, about to be executed. I had time to sit and look at it and finally realize there's no such thing as phlogiston. What's happening is when we burn the wood, something is actually being added to it. Mm-hmm. That's causing it to take.
Oh,
this
yes.
form.
Yeah, I do remember this. Okay.
Yeah. And that's a paradigm shift. And to me, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
What we're looking at is a paradigm shift from Titans are these coherent beings of arcane power who exist in our universe as big giant goobers who order everything, and that is something we've seen them doing. But the paradigm shift is why they're doing and what the it ultimately is supposed to be. Because if you look at Azeroth, what do they do with all those experimental zones they built and all these weird labs? And they're trying to make beings.
Yeah, funny you should mention that. So this is something that I wanted to bring up, and this is something that happens in when you go to Alderloth. When you go there, despite it being a Titanic paradise, there is combat. And as a matter of fact, we actually fight Freya there. And it's very similar to Antorus. Afterwards, we obtain a Watcher's Log. And if you're talking about why isn't this, the preferred timeline, wasn't Alderloth it? Let me read a couple things. You get it, and you open it up, you press it, and it says, Species Designate, Yangol. Content, a study of the species' habits and applied learning. First document in the first log. According to records left by previous watchers, subjects have been living in a cave system for generations. Subjects appear to have mastered basic tools and fire. Some appear to be in adult stage, which is impressive. Catch and release programs initiated for additional study. The next log. Prior records indicate a previous watcher's interest in this species. Upon further investigation of information gathered, records indicate Yangol have an average lifespan of 20 years. These findings indicate the longest non-bestial lifespan found so far. Further studies of their ways could increase watcher lifespan significantly. Next log. This log has been found behind the wreckage of a previous watcher. Investigation into its claims has yielded positive results. Initial studies suggest that adoption of the Yongal's run and hide in caves strategy has led to a 75% increase in local Watcher lifespan. We plan to find some way to transmit these findings to the larger Watcher community, assuming contact can be resumed. And the last part of it. Past records indicate a previous Watcher's attempt at replicating Yongal defense mechanisms. While preliminary results were promising, continued testing resulted in a learned response from the local wildlife, and any prior gains were eliminated. Evidently, running and hiding in small caves was the important part of the tactic, attempting to modify Watcher construction systems to allow for smaller Watchers in the future. They learned nothing in Alderloth at this point. When we go there and we see the Utopia, the average humanoid lifespan doesn't exist past 20 years, or at least it's shorter than that. The Yongal are actually much more long-lived than most of the other ones.
And they're living in caves, which is like, what is the, so you have cave Yongal?
Yeah.
It is interesting to think about this.
The cave Yongal that are hiding from the whatever wildlife, so the dinosaurs, the devil sars, or anything else that might be roaming around the planet. Because again, if the Titan Watchers were never created, not in the real sense that we know them as, and thus nothing ever smaller was created, such as the Earthen or anything else, this is it. That's all there is. Life isn't that hardy anymore because it can't. Azeroth is a much different place as a result of it. It doesn't have those defense mechanisms, and life stunted.
It wouldn't even have elves.
Yeah, this is not Tauren. This is Yongal.
Yeah. And it's obviously Yongal that are not much like the Yongal we know. And the only reason the Yongal we know are the way they are is because the Mogu amped them up for warfare.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, they might have been like Eohippus, for all we know. They might have been little tiny sheep people. Because, sheep are the closest relatives to cows. Boss, and they're all ruminants. So maybe they were like little sheep people. We have no idea. But that's interesting to think about that concept that we've been talking about this whole time. The idea that Alderloth doesn't lead to any knowledge. It doesn't lead to any changes. It doesn't lead to any new perspectives. And for all that they love order, the Titans that weren't cuckoo for destruction pops like Sargeras wanted to learn new things. Like when you go to the end of Antorus, the Titans address you and they don't talk to you like you're a moron.
No, they don't.
Or a speck. They talk to you like you're a thinking being that can understand them. It's actually, I got more respect from Aman'Thul than I did from Odin.
Wild to think about, right?
Aman'Thul, who made Odin, to whom Odin is like, a remote-controlled toy that he uses to fix things. Talk to me like I was a Pokemon. Aman'Thul talked to me like I was like the last hope for the entire universe. Just like we've been saying, just like you've been saying this whole time. That's how the Titans talked to us when we interacted directly with them. They did not treat us like we were disposable or less than. Because and think about it, if they were talking to you and the mortal beings of Azeroth are what we think they are, then they were talking to a Titan, the final Titan.
Yeah.
They were talking to it. There they are. That's actually something to think about as we move forward. Like Alderloth is doomed because it isn't going to create that.
Yeah,
there will be no process. All these dimensions, all of them, there are dimensions where one force is ascendant and the rest are not.
And it's also something to think about too, that because of that, not only is Alderloth sort of doomed, the universe is doomed. Existence is hanging precariously in the balance as a result of it, because there is nothing to stand against the void or whatever the great consumer is.
Yeah,
because
we don't know what it is yet, but it's almost like that Pokemon monster. Do you remember the Pokemon monster in the original game that was basically a glitch?
Yep.
It's like that. Yeah, it's like an unknown, a glitch, a thing that can't be, not a thing that shouldn't be or isn't. It's literally the inverse of creation.
Yeah, and I think that's fascinating. I think that it is. I will never, ever not be surprised at how I think we've all been thinking about this wrong for years. That it's, again, Azeroth isn't necessarily the final Titan in the way that we think, and that Matt is right in that we are all manifestations of Azeroth's thoughts and dreams, or id. And that's why we can do the things we can do. That's why the Pantheon doesn't talk down to us like, ha ha ha, tiny flesh thing. No, they address us directly. They thank us, because who could have saved them but another Titan, at least in their grand scheme of things, right? It's why even when we go to the Pantheon of Death, even when we're in the Shadowlands, none of them treat us like we're, stupid. I think they recognize to a certain amount of or a certain point what we are. Maybe not fully, maybe not until the end.
Well, the Mallwalker thing is actually very interesting.
Yeah, because that's something they're not used to.
We're doing something they can't.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing something that even the jailer couldn't do. That's why he needed his ridiculously elaborate circuitous plan. My ridiculously circuitous plan is 1/4 complete. I'm sorry, but every time I saw the jailer doing his stuff, I always thought that.
But you're not wrong.
No, but seriously, that's why he needed to do that, because he needed Sylvanas because he couldn't do the stuff he had her doing. But she could, because where is she from?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that answers at least that. We could talk about this for a while longer, but I think it's fascinating. It's fascinating to sit and talk about the timelines and why ours needs to be preserved. And you sort of get an idea of that as you're moving through the current patch of why things have to go this way, why things are so bad if they don't.
To steal an idea from the Marvel, Infinity War and Endgames, there's one reality where this thing can actually be won, and it's not any of the ones where only one force is going to go in there and fight by itself. None of them can do this. You can't defend all of reality with 1/8 of reality. You have to defend all of reality with all of reality.
And I think the first one saw that. I think that's why this timeline has to be preserved in the manner that it is. Not because the Titans saw it, but because the first one saw this eons ago, at the dawn of their creation, when they started pushing everything into motion. Because if they didn't, everything would be for naught, and reality would cease to exist, potentially. But
that's why there's one true timeline. It's not because the Titans decided there should be one true timeline. It's because there's literally only one timeline where if you go to a certain point, everything is dead. You have to go with the one timeline that can actually get past that point.
And that's where we're at. But I think that's going to do it for today. Folks, thank you very much. Blizzard Watch is made possible due to your generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Your continued support means that this podcast site and community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to the podcast, better chance at having your question answered on our podcast or the Q&A and ads-free site experience. Again, if you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those in. You can mail us at podcast@blizzardwatch.com, singular podcast. If you want to hit us up on Discord, you can. We have the Q and Podcast Questions channel. And for our Patreon supporters, this is a way of saying thank you for keeping the lights on. We have our Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel, where we tend to look for questions or themes for the show. If you can't support us monetarily, again, we understand. This is where I'm going to make that call to action, folks. Be sure to leave us comments or likes or upvotes or whatever is available on the platform that you are listening to us on, or share us with your friends. Those matter just as much as everybody else that's helping us keep the lights on with
Absolutely.
money donations. Spotify looks at that. Apple looks at that. Stitcher and everywhere else looks at that as well. So everywhere we are, the more you like and share, the more you put our content out there, the more their algorithms pick it up and put it out there. This also includes YouTube. If you weren't aware, we upload all of our podcasts to YouTube as well on the Blizzard Watch channel. You can go there, like, subscribe, and all that other good stuff. I know you're probably sick of hearing it from all of your content creators out there.
Yeah, but we're kind of in a place where we kind of have to. It's not that we love. Nobody likes to get up and say, "Hey, now that we've done our show, please, please, please." But I mean, we can't all just decide we're going to turn a beloved social media site into x.com. So yeah.
But that does matter. The likes and subscriptions there work as well, because that feeds into the YouTube stuff, feeds into YouTube Music, which is a separate application that does feed our podcast to people as well. So those do make a divine difference for us and the longevity of our show and site.
Can't see me, but I'm nodding.
So thank you very much, folks. We appreciate all of your continued support. We'll see you next week.